revised, reloaded, re-edited.
Sometimes we get so deep into conversation that we have separate segments worthy of their own place in the sun.
Here is a reshuffled mini episode.
Over the years, I had seen Spielberg films when I was a kid, not having even known, what Spielberg was. So, earliest memories.
Who is
like,
this guy?
yeah, exactly. Like, and for me, it's just, the films were just so eponymous with all of my favorite movies growing up. You know what I mean? So when it comes to, E.T. and Jurassic Park, and then later on Close Encounters and War of the Worlds, and just what an unbelievable resume he has. Every single thing he did. I mean, and I'm looking back over his filmography right now, trying to find something that wasn't, but I think basically everything he did was either a critical or commercial success or both. And just everything was just so far ahead of its time. Just
you can tell he made the proper calculations, and every once in a while, especially in recent years, I've seen people say, "Oh, I don't care for some of his historical movies." I'm like, well, here's the thing: he's not even doing a typical pedestrian historical epic.
Right.
You can't compare The Post or Lincoln to any other, 3-hour John Ford movie.
It's just hard to even wrap my mind around the fact that, here's a guy who put out, Schindler's List in 1993 and then Jurassic Park in 1994. Like,
absolutely. Absolutely. I take it you guys have seen the HBO documentary about him from a few, and I thought that was just it did go deeper. It wasn't just a clip show. Liam Neeson did say the same thing he said on the director's years ago, where it's like he's a painter looking, painting his canvas and making sure all the right details are there. And I was just like, but I did like how they did discuss, how he did all this serious stuff and it was rejected at the time because he's like, nah, you're the blockbuster guy. You're not the important message themes. And it's like, well, he has themes in even his blockbusters, like how science can prove you wrong in Jurassic Park. And then, of course, with Indiana Jones, you got the whole, estranged father and going with your gut instinct on whether, the archaeology dig, goes to something greater.
Yeah, and arguably, all of those talents, his ability to direct, a large cast and a large setting with large sets and everything is just so big. I mean, all of that also aided him when he did the dramas, your Schindler's List and your Amistads and things like that. I think all of it really lent itself well to those types of films when you get down to it. It's interesting to see how those talents just bridge back and forth to straight up blockbusters, to dramas, and then back again. It's wild. So yeah, that was kind of my journey with Steven Spielberg. And all the major ones are in there. All your Indiana Joneses and War of the Worlds and freaking Munich was. I'm just looking down the list right now. It's just unbelievable what this guy has to his name. So brilliant.
I got a confession to make, you guys. I kind of messed up. I watched all of his non-union Mexican equivalent movies, Senora Spielbergo. They were good. No, I don't remember a time where Steven Spielberg wasn't someone who I knew.
Caligula de Spielbergo. Yeah, I don't.
I've always been a movie fan. I mean, I think my father took me to see Empire Strikes Back when I was 2, and somehow I don't know. He talked to me about Jaws a lot before Jurassic Park came out. I was way too scared to watch Jaws. I'm sorry, before E.T. came out. And somehow I just knew the name Steven Spielberg. I knew how movies were made. And then in 1984, they had this awesome behind-the-scenes documentary about the Temple of Doom on PBS. And my dad recorded it for me. And I watched that, before Temple of Doom was on VHS, I watched that over and over and over. And a couple of years ago, I rewatched Temple of Doom, and I said, wow, this movie is how I kind of understand the film medium, because I saw how it was all put together.
Absolutely. I miss those days too, where you had to actually stay after the credits for a special feature.
This was on PBS, and it is on YouTube. I watched it again recently.
Oh, nice. Temple of Doom. Damn. That is good. And it does kind of just make you just reevaluate any kind of movie, or whether you like it or not. Still, at the end of the day, it's like, okay, well, you can't say it was, forced or without some serious effort. And I think, he did kind of just show how it can be larger than life while at the same time how it's a passion and you know what you want to do. And, 84 is already a big year, when he's producing so much stuff and directing, again, 2 blockbusters a year. So it's like, man.
Yeah. And all the producing and writing. And I've just always been a fan. I'm really happy this podcast. I went out and watched all his recent stuff, which I hadn't really paid attention to. So I'm all caught up. I've seen all of Steven Spielberg and Senor Spielberg's films. So
he just understood the business, I guess you could say, and he understood what he wanted to do and what people weren't going to see. The fact that he even convinced Joe Dante is like, hey, you got to change the ending of Gremlins.
Yeah.
And Dante obliged because he's already down to work with Spielberg because he understands that, he's like, hey, the guy at least had a sense of humor and hired me because he saw my Jaws knockoff Piranha because it was the best one. And basically the only people Dante doesn't get along with are just Warner Brothers executives.
and much like Dante, Spielberg loves film. He's always loved film.
Anyone who I've heard work with him has always acted like everyone is important. He never acted like, yeah, I'm the guy calling all the shots here, kid. None of that. Sweep the leg and everyone else, is expendable. None of that. And so I think that is kind of unique. It's like, okay, so you've earned it. You're not the guy who's got a cool and then it's just unpleasant to work with at the end of the day. None of that. So
isn't it refreshing, especially in today's world with all the news stories that come out about our favorite directors or our favorite actors, that we all love these films, and then it comes out that, oh yeah, but he was actually a real cad on set and he did this and he did that, and you never hear that from Spielberg. And in fact, anything, it's the opposite. You hear more and more, you think, oh, he must have been a real bear. No. Oh no. I mean, people will come to his defense.
Isn't Steven Spielberg from Ohio?
Yeah. Cincinnati native. Thank you.
Yeah. That's probably why he's such a great director. That explains it all. All great things are from Ohio.
He gets you, man. Alrighty.
Those formidable first 10 years of his life right here in the Queen City.
Sweet. Alrighty. Danny boy.
Well, it's basically been said, like, you could not be the child of the 80s and 90s and not have seen a great deal of his work. E.T., Jurassic Park, the Indiana Jones movies, but I tend to prefer some of the more obscure stuff myself, like the aforementioned Duel, which is a favorite of mine, and one that seems no one's heard of, Twice Upon a Time, even though he didn't direct that, he produced it.
Oh yeah, with like John Nordy or somebody. Yeah. Yeah, very true. He did so many other side projects, and I was always drawn to them, let alone anything Industrial Light and Magic was doing effects for, and it seemed like video stores just started getting very lame. Like, they just, after like 96, they just started getting rid of all the obscure stuff, and with all the easy stuff that everyone had already, bought multiple times. It's like, God damn it, I want to watch all the obscure stuff.
and of course, the Cyndi Lauper video for Goonies.
Yeah. The fact that
I don't know how to get her out.
Oh, wow. Deep cuts.
And it is kind of funny how you can tell if his name's on it, it's either a franchise that he originated. He's basically tied for Van Damme for person with the most movies that he's originated that everyone's done multiple sequels to. With or without their involvement. We swear he was not involved with the Poltergeist and Jurassic Park sequels.
Well, the second Jurassic Park.
Yeah, second Jurassic Park.
Right, and which he later tore a new one saying, yeah, it's not all that great a story.
No.
and I'm sorry, but I will forever see that one South Park episode about the last Indiana Jones movie.
What do you mean? Last Crusade was awesome.
Hey, Indiana Jones, what you doing in our parks?
There's only 3 Indiana Jones movies.
Only 3, I agree.
Yeah.
There's only 3 that I've seen.
Yeah, and that's not counting the TV show, the video games, and the upcoming
Young Indie
Chronicles.
Related note, I'm seriously convinced the only things keeping Harrison Ford alive at this stage are marijuana, flying, and just sheer hatred.
Probably is. And keeping his kids in line.
He makes no attempt to hide the hatred.
I mean, I don't know. What would you do if you were married to Ally McBeal? Oh, God, moving on.
Probably end up having a son like Kylo Ren.
Nice.
Oh, God. Okay, John, next. What's your intro to the stool?
I'm actually one because of my older brother. he's the one that actually introduced me to ones like Jaws, Jurassic Park, and especially the Indiana Jones trilogy. That's what really got me to love him as a filmmaker all these years. Later on is when I discovered all his obscure stuff like Amistad and Munich, which I did not know was one of his films until many years later. He's always been one that I've always appreciated, even if it's some I'm not a big fan of, which I'm sure we'll mention sometime soon. And to me, it's very rare when he makes a bad one. I mean, there are some, trust me. To me, he's one of a kind, and we just don't have that much of that anymore, especially with certain directors.
Oh, no. But I mean, to even have a video game based off your, movie-making adventures is like, he basically was embracing every kind of thing. I knew people who knew his name just because, how can you not when his name is at the beginning of every Animaniacs episode?
That's true.
Yeah, Tiny Toons.
Yeah, it's like he was embracing every kind of property, even older Warner Brothers stuff and all this other Universal spectacles. And
related note here, actually, about 2 years ago, I think it was, when they announced there was going to be new Tiny Toons, I had to let my brother know because he loved that show as a kid. and I sent him a link of one article, and he said, I didn't realize Spielberg was involved. That explains why it was so damn good.
And I mean, it just keeps continuing, just producing, Clint Eastwood's World War II movies, and then every other TNT spectacle miniseries is like he's embracing all of that, and is still just. I wasn't surprised.
HBO series.
Oh, totally, yeah.
Band of Brothers, good stuff.
And then Men in Black is like, yeah, of course he.
Yeah.
Was one of many people who said, "Let me get you involved with some people I know who totally understand your vision." And then seeing his cameos for the longest time, I just would guffaw as like he's in Austin Powers.
Yep.
Blues Brothers, my God. I mean, so go figure. So I'll just circle around. Alex, what are the pros and cons of Spielberg? Like you can talk about his more underrated movie, and then his a bad movie he's done that doesn't get enough hate.
I think the pros are pretty outstanding. I mean, there's so much to draw off of. I mean, from visual effects, he's pioneered so much in the industry. From the scale of his films, I think he relies on scale a lot and scalability of what you're watching, and that's what really makes it so exciting. I think sometimes, and it's happened, War of the Worlds comes to mind, where the vision might just be a little bit too big and just kind of overtake, the drama that's happening in the background or the actors and the performances they're trying to put out there. So I think he has been guilty of that in the past, and it works really well in some settings. If you look at, Jurassic Park and the wild things that happen in, the two films that he was involved with, or Indiana Jones was a film that struck a great balance, particularly The Last Crusade, which is like my top 3 favorite films of all time. I just think it's unbelievably brilliant. So it's just interesting that he has such a wide range.
Very well said.
I appreciate it. Thanks.
Because he never gives up. He has like 3 themes going, like adventure with some family connection, historical epic, World War II for the most part, and then kind of a Frank Capra kind of drama throwback, and then like you say, just aliens. Just ever since Close Encounters in E.T., he does play on that whole alien thing. Whether it is Taken miniseries or Falling Skies and dinosaurs, even I guess you could say, are kind of in the same kind of spectrum.
You see the theme of aviation a lot too.
That's a very true thing too. Yeah, you can tell he just gets with all the kinds of museums and everything, and he's kind of done that since Schindler's List, where he was reopening all that money he made off it. He contributed to just like Jewish research for Holocaust survivors and other stuff. Is just so unreal. Is like, okay, so you can't say he's a guy who didn't give back in some capacity. He's giving you some knowledge before he gives you the escapism, and then tries not to preach too much to you. I think
it's interesting. Schindler's List, and like you said, his work with a lot of Jewish communities and centers and stuff like that was him rediscovering his Jewish roots. He was born a Jew, but kind of walked away from Judaism because he was effectively ostracized and picked on as a young child. And he was sort of embarrassed to be a Jew. And so around that time was when he started having a family of his own, decided to raising his family as practicing Jews, and that was him rediscovering his religion and rediscovering his past, and that was his way of sort of, I think in a way it was his way of sort of apologizing for turning his back on it all those years.
I think I have seen kind of narratives like that in various other articles on it, and that's so true because it's like he was the guy who, you know, his parents were away working and divorcing, and that was just putting a toll on him to where it's like, okay, I just want kids to come over and play around with the 16 millimeter, you know, build a train set, and just, you know, I'm the geek, you know, before anyone knew what that word is, you know.
Yeah, he said in that doc he really only felt like a real person when he was behind the camera.
I think a lot of filmmakers do kind of get that too. So he's like, when you see some of the greats kind of misspeak in an interview, it's like, yeah, they want to go home, drink some wine, hang out with their family, and then only be annoyed when they're, you know, at work, which is, you know, making something that other people, you know, their only reward other than the money they make opening day, you know, is their other than their salary is just seeing people react to it. And when something doesn't take off in the theaters, that's always going to get them, because they're just like, what do I say? Do I say the audiences are stupid and risk, you know, dividing my fan base, or do I just fess up and say, yeah, I'll try again if someone will give me the money for the next project? You know? Not everybody can be like Milos Forman, where you make movies that resonate with both audiences and critics and yet don't make any bank, you know? You definitely can say he had all bases covered, because he just somehow, he was an entertainer first and he's a businessman second, but he always knew, was like, okay, this is how we're going to market it. This is how it's going to open. This is what's going to get people, you know, to see these kinds of movies. It's definitely kind of unheard of nowadays. You still see some people as like who we all love, and yet still being utilized, and yet people are still complaining, yeah, you're not making any money for us.
I think, you know, as great as he is, you know, he does have an Achilles heel.
We all do.
Yeah, we all do. And his Achilles himself, it may be just that small, but I do think we all know his pros. I think his biggest con is maybe he doesn't think anything's too big for him. And with a guy with such a big imagination or a big plan to make movies, when you give him a broad scope movie, you kind of watch it and you're just like, I don't know why I'm watching this. For example, like War of the Worlds was like classic one. Minority Report, you know, like he has movies where, or like The Adventures of Tintin, where it was just like action packed, but it was like, what's the story? You know, I see all the action and things going on, but what's the story? So I think that's his biggest things. I think his strength is when you tell him, or when he thinks of something, of a story and a person, which is maybe why he always casts Tom Hanks, because Tom Hanks is kind of like the most interesting, boring actor I know. But I think that's true. Yeah, I think that's why he loves Tom Hanks, because, you know, if he casts like Tom Cruise, I'm not a fan of Tom Cruise, but it's Tom Cruise movies. Tom Cruise is a guy who wants to go big. And, you know, you got Steven Spielberg, another guy who wants to go big. And every time I watch that duo, that tag team between those two, I'm just always like, maybe we can focus more on the story and less on the action.
And those are like some of the few people where it's like, even in those two movies, like, I don't even see Tom Cruise for once.
Yeah.
Everything else, it's him running. Is like, well, he runs a lot in those movies, but I'm not seeing Tom Cruise running.
Yeah.
For a change. But yeah, it is kind of wild. I've seen people who complain about movies being kind of just Saturday morning cartoons and nothing else to it. And I saw so many of them praising Tintin. I'm like, really? That has a lot of the cons that you complain about typically. But I understand that it kind of... It basically hit its fan base, which was, you know, a collab between him and Peter Jackson adapting a, you know, comic book, comic strip serial. And this is like, yeah. But I guess you could say in recent years, Crystal Skull is the only one that's kind of just an internet punching bag.
True story.
For nuke the fridge to be a new phrase, that says something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Most definitely.
Can't say he didn't leave his mark.
Wow.
Back in the day, I do recall Out of all his own TV show productions, I guess the only one that I've seen be mocked back in the day and yet everyone watched still was Sequest.
Oh, Lord.
That was a show with a lot of potential.
And it's just like...
That was not realized very quickly.
Yeah, and it didn't help that Roy Scheider is like, hey, I'll get Roy Scheider from Jaws. And it's like, Roy was on the record saying, I fucking hate that show.
He ended up hating, not to go down too far of a rabbit hole or anything, but I discovered that show on some streaming platform, NBC's thing or something like
Peacock,
that. Yeah, Peacock. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to watch that again. I remember kind of liking it. And the first half of the first season, there was a lot of potential. And then you can see where the studio started screwing with it.
Wait till you get to the Bill Shatner as a Russian episode.
Yeah, been there, and that's not too far after when I stopped. And that's when Roy Scheider started really disliking it. He wanted it to be the sort of
Star Trek kind of is like,
teach a lesson about the environment and the ocean and all that stuff. Yeah, the message program. And about halfway through the first season, you could tell the studio started getting involved and like, no, let's have aliens. And that's when Roy Scheider was like, I'm out.
Replace him with
Michael Ironside.
Yeah, he was
guy from ER.
He was forced into the second season, and then as soon as he could bolt, he did, and I think I'll stop there. That's a whole nother show.
No, that's fine. And I remember me and my sister watching the Minority Report show. It's like, you think this would be great, and then it's just next thing you know, a great cast, and none of them have any characters. They're just all doing their best CSI imitations, but not even that kind of cheesy level. It's just like, okay, so unrealized potential. This is 2 commercial breaks in. I already want to stop this. And then I saw other people realize it because it got launched on Netflix a few years back. I was like, do not bother. Play the video game if you must have more of that world, but do not watch that show because this is like, it's just so easy to not have realized potential. And I can't blame him for wanting to make it a show because he was attached to all this stuff at one point or another. And I remember Under the Dome was kind of the next Lost or poor man's Walking Dead for a while. But everything else, I do think, like you say, he does kind of invest some heavy talent into it. I recall years ago when Extant, this Halle Berry sci-fi show, was picked out of his people at Amblin got part of a screenwriting competition, and they instantly said, hey, we make this a show. So I think he does have some pretty competent people who look for some serious stuff that can kind of appease all kinds of crowds. Like you say, my uncle, when I told him about Peacock streaming Sequest, he lit up saying, I want to rewatch that. But yeah, there are other people who's like, like you say, it is kind of a disappointment. And On the Lot was kind of one of those, that should have been a big, fun competition show. Who wants to be the next filmmaker, with him as a judge? And it's like, for whatever reason, it's just like, the production crew just screwed it up. Doing it on Fox, and it was just like, I never saw any of it. Saw the Entertainment Weekly gossip about it, and it's like, what happened to this show? It's had those misses, like you say.
I think that his basic attractions can also be one of his biggest weaknesses, and that's the schmaltz. It works great in the scene in Jaws when the young Brody is imitating his father, but like, I couldn't get through War Horse, man. I tried.
I saw it, but I wouldn't say it's his strongest. I just was at least applaud him for approaching World War I. But I will say it does get a little Disney-esque with the whole, don't kill the horse bit at the end. But I can't blame you. It's a like it or hate it movie. But no, that is true. He does kind of, anything that he has, at least you'll always see once, just because there's some good shots and talent involved. And I applaud him for always improvising with his kids, because even he knows that, hey, no one knows how to write for kids. Kid actors aren't always the strongest when they start out. Just always kind of improvising with them, just orchestrating his own conversations. That's like as much as he deviates from the scripts.
Yeah.
Well, I actually admire examples where he took source material that it was good, but he made it better. Jaws and Jurassic Park are probably the best examples. Jaws.
definitely.
Jaws, honestly, it's a god awful book. It's just terrible. You know?
Yeah, it's pretty.
I've never read it. Probably.
It's funny. It's funny. I never knew it was a book until years
Yeah, I
later.
never knew it was a book.
Yeah, like you're not vested in any of the characters. They're way less likable. You're practically rooting for the shark half the time. With you know, he had to make alterations to up the drama and
Hooper
spoiler
bangs
alert,
Mrs. Brody.
spoiler alert. Hooper has an affair with Brody's wife.
That's right.
Yeah, Psychosemantic, who Ken know, and I know, chronicled it pretty well. How is like it's pretty much a political thriller with some creature attacks. And it's like,
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
Wow.
And there were several subplots that just distracted from it. And with Jurassic Park, it's a good book, particularly if you're a science nerd, but there's too much science jargon. It drags it down a lot. There's too many characters.
Crichton is very
subplots.
full of himself when you let him off his leash, and he knew how to just rein him back in. And it's just like you say. I mean, I knew a lot of people who praised The Lost World, and I remember reading that book and just after a few pages, just being like, okay, so other people are dying, and the story's becoming a little distorted to me. It's losing me because it's just nonstop. Again, chases without any investment, like you say, and the first book was cool from, like you say, a sci-fi thriller, and once you got past the Tom Clancy-esque dull descriptions.
True.
Like you say, there's other Crichton books that should totally be movies or miniseries, but they just haven't done yet. But I do like to say, like hitting on that, I do like how he knew what compromises to make and just have Jaws and Jurassic Park kind of recreate the creature feature. Make it be more than just a so bad it's good or goofy movie. It's like now there's something for everybody. You got to have some humor. You got to have a despicable character get killed at the end, and then you got to have some other just cool terror and escapism and adventure. Bonus points for having Dr. Grant dress up like Indiana Jones multiple times.
I'll also acknowledge a drawback of his, and I said it before, the man could be an absolute whore at times. Like, stuff that's like, seriously, man, why are you putting your name on this? He's doing it for the money.
It's true.
Yeah, it's like never. Kind of to quote Brent Spiner from Star Trek, is like I remember him in a funny interviews as saying there were plenty of times where Jack Warner never showed up on set. And like, yeah, there's plenty of stuff where, executive producer Spielberg. And it's like, yeah, and as involved as he was a phone call meeting.
Yep.
And telling people why it works and giving them their blessing and telling the other guys, just leave them alone. Gonna check up on you. But like you say, there are times where he's pretty much a Joel Silver type where he's just, this should be bigger, and yet it's just not. Just you give him the talent too much freedom, and then you know something's wrong when there's not even an interview of you promoting the movies. Because he does do that every once in a while. It's like you're seeing him promote a movie because virtually no one else is known in the cast and crew. It's like he is he's the courier, he is the transfer guy. He's the messenger. I'll just say this: 1941 is the only movie I just absolutely cannot stand. I refuse to go back to.
I was actually going to mention that one because.
Okay, please tell us more because. Because you've told us before how AI is disappointing. Twilight Zone, the movie has a few installments that aren't as interesting, but that Hook has some adventure despite some overacting. It was like 1941.
That's a gigantic mess. That's what I like to say.
Yeah.
I mean,
big cast.
It was a big cast, and that's why I went to watch it because I went, oh my god, Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi in a Spielberg movie. I want to see that, and then you watch it and you go, oh god, no. Why?
I had wanted to see it years ago, and then other people in my family rented it from the video store when I was already kind of being like, I'm just going to watch Spielberg's newest stuff. I've seen most of his older stuff. And it's like, I kept walking out multiple times. It's like...
Same here.
Yeah, I got it for this podcast, and I felt like I was watching a foreign movie with no subtitles. I was like, is this movie in English? I literally do not understand what is happening or what anyone is talking about. And then we saw Nancy Allen in Garters, and that was okay. But that was it.
Yeah, she was. Yeah. She and the cast really do their best, but it's just like, despite the stunts and everything, is like, I at the same time, he did need that. He did need a slap on the wrist.
Oh yeah.
After doing.
Oh yeah.
I have a friend who swears by it because he grew up with it. So.
Oh yeah, my uncle will definitely buy a Blu-ray if he had the money. But like you say, the same one who swears by Sequest. So it is interesting how a lot of his lesser movies still have some kind of cult audience, but like you say, that kind of around that same time is when he got close to Bob Zemeckis and he knew when to kind of rein himself in a bit before he occasionally would slip here and there. And I wouldn't be surprised if West Side Story flops, and I wouldn't be surprised if it wins all the awards this year and is a crowd pleaser, you know?
Yeah. Maybe he's just a big hit or miss, guy. More hits, but if he's gonna flop, man, he's gonna flop hard. Because 1941 gave me like Airplane vibes. If Airplane was like really trash,
I was gonna say.
That's literally what it gave me. And they,
definitely inspired by the National Lampoon.
Yeah.
Wasn't he working with John Landis on that one? I could be wrong.
Possibly. They were buddies back.
I think so.
Pre-Twilight Zone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was wondering if maybe you have to take it with
that was Zemeckis, my bad, who wrote it. Thanks, Zemeckis.
I'm wondering
if his film debut, good God, it didn't get better from there, did it?
I
know.
I do wonder if you have to kind of take it with the time in which it was made. He was still a relatively young, and despite having a couple really big hits under his belt with Jaws and Close Encounters of the Third Kind, he was still kind of experimenting and trying to find his real place. And I'm sure he didn't want to be pigeonholed into the horror or sci-fi. And so 1941, I think, was just him maybe dipping a toe in a water in a pool that he wasn't familiar with, and obviously with mixed results. And
makes you wonder if that's what he did producing at the time. He's like, he saw how easily they could bury him if they really wanted to, and so it's like, instead of risking being out of work, it's like, I'll take some other people who I think can do it better than me. I don't have to do everything.
It's probably really lucky that he had Jaws and Close Encounters under his belt, because I think 1941 probably would have killed his career if he had.
Most definitely.
Oh, definitely.
I agree.
Because someone gave him the chance to do Raiders of the Lost Ark, and then I'm pretty sure when that happened, 1941 was okay. We'll let that one slide.
If that had been his first flop after Jaws, he totally would have been buried. But since he had that, Close Encounters, and Sugarland was a critical darling, and he had killed on TV, he had options. He had people whose minds he had picked. And so, like you say, had it been number two, it would have been just that, number two. It's like,
everybody
don't forget, Jaws was, nobody expected it to hit like that.
No. Other than
movies,
Peter,
period.
Yes.
Yeah, and it took him even years later to start adapting Peter Benchley's work. They just started realizing, we got to just do it for TV, have it be a miniseries event. I'm surprised he never revisited Benchley. He's like, it's not going to get any better with him from there. So
because honestly, Benchley sucks.
The island's great.
Oh, good. But I guess you could say early on, he kind of was thinking like all the other TV producers like Dick Wolf or Steven Bochco. He's like, okay, so I got to round up all the other talent that I know, put in a word for them, and help launch their careers, because the industry can't just be just me.
Right.
I got to take the pressure off a bit.
Maybe that's a little bit of him doing the giving back too. The industry gave him a lot, and so he's trying to turn back and give other people, the same opportunities that he had.
He definitely loved Charlie Chaplin kind of movies, so he wanted some of those kinds of comedies, and then he wanted some other kind of just, Treasure of the Sierra Madre. It's very sad that not as many people have seen that, but they've seen all the other Bogart and John Huston classics. I'm like, no, you should see that, regardless or not you're familiar with Indiana Jones. And in which case, if you're not familiar with that, we're not even going to start the conversation. But it's like, you should see some of the movies he is inspired by and realize why in Kurosawa really do kind of mirror each other in so many ways. And it is kind of wild how Francis Ford Coppola and George Lucas start doing tributes to Kurosawa's work, but I can't find anything on whether or not he actually ever met Kurosawa, despite being a huge fan.
I have no idea. No,
I don't think he has.
He just kind of admired him from afar.
something about Spielberg that we've all said in one way or another is his sort of eclectic amount of genres that he's found himself directing, that he's not let himself get, as I said before, pigeonholed in one genre, which is something that a lot of directors do find themselves, either through choice of their own or just because that's what the industry will give him. And he's never allowed himself to do that. I mean, he's done every.
Be that his experiments have made money for the most part too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Very good point.
We'll return after these messages.
Hey, it's Brent Pope, the host of Breakfast with Brent Pope. You've seen me on some of your favorite TV shows saying things like, "Give it up, Jimmy. You got to sink this putt to win." On Breakfast with Brent Pope, I sit down with guests from the entertainment world, and we do it all over breakfast. Or should I say Brentfast? Every week on Brentfast, you get inside Hollywood info and tips, great breakfast recs and foodie debates. Most of all, you get the most delightful 30 minutes of your week. So dig in. It's Brentfast time. Listen at Brentfast.com, Apple Podcasts, or wherever fine podcasts are found.
Welcome to the Better Call Daddy Show, the #1 podcast where we admit, no matter what happens, Daddy has the advice we need to fix our problems. Introducing my dad, Mr. Wayne Friedman.
That was good. It would be nice if you could also sing a song.
What would the song be?
You love Paris in the springtime. I just made up some words to it.
I love Rena in the springtime. I love Rena in the fall.
That's right. That's good enough.
What I do is interview people of interest, share it with my dad, and get my dad's advice. My dad is my hero. Nobody's got my daddy.
Oh boy, let's go to Grandpa.
You like to be a little rebel. I tried to rein you in. I have a daughter named Rena that acts just like I did. She's got a son that is not only just like me, but it's just like her.
I'm your host, Rena Friedman Watts. Invite your friends, subscribe, and I'm excited to take this journey with you. Let's dive in.
She was teasing this guy with this sword, and she accidentally cut his dick.
Oh my God, I'm dying.
And then he started to enjoy it.
I started going down the phone sex rabbit hole. You've got the wankers, and they jerk off in 5 seconds, and then they're done because A, they don't want to spend money, and B, they're quick.
My stepfather had mania. If I'm yelling at one of my kids, that fear, that rigid fear.
Mom even said to me, I hope you have a kid just like you.
There are lots of people that are being bought and sold right now for profit.
If you think you're going to kill yourself, shut up and kill yourself. If you're not going to kill yourself, then shut up, smarten up, and it's all on you. The bullshit has to end.
Wow.
When I was 11 years old, I was raped and molested over the course of a year.
What Jeffrey Epstein had was a sickness inside of him.
I am Evan Castrilli Carmichael. I could do anything that I believe that I can.
I'm so excited too. Let's go.
Next on Better Call Daddy with my mom and my grandpa.
Stay tuned.
The Jacked Up Review Show podcast is honored to be part of the Blind Knowledge Podcast Network. Join anytime, talk the talk, and enjoy yourselves. There's something enlightening for everyone with this crowd of cool cats. Check them out.
I mean, he's done everything from the drama to the epic period pieces, the war dramas, the adventures, the science fiction. He's tried his hand at some comedies. He reminds me of another director that I really admire for doing the same thing as Robert Wise.
That's a very good comparison, especially considering, he was definitely in, the black room, messing with the film, seeing how to cut it and how it can make an impression based on when you cut away versus when you don't. And Robert Wise was another one who just talked about, you're a lucrative filmmaker and yet not as many films that we like. But it's like, no, he has a lot to applaud for. And then there's our others where it's like, not sure about that one. But yeah, I think that is a good comparison. I can't say it better. It's just pretty much it.
Robert Wise, he did a lot of horror films in the 40s and science fictions in the 50s and musicals in the 60s, and then revisited science fiction again in the 70s. He was just an amazing, just different types of films, and I think that people 50 years from now will be saying the same thing about Spielberg.
Yeah, I can't think why they wouldn't, but that is true. And more or less, it's just kind of interesting seeing someone evolve that way. I mean, yeah, with Wise, he had The Haunting and Sound of Music, Star Trek the Motion Picture, and all these other movies, and it's like, yeah, I mean, Spielberg definitely never said any genre was beneath him. Never took.
Yeah, exactly.
No.
And he loved all kinds of movies, so I'm sure he loved being scared. He loved being intrigued. He loved crying. He loved being excited. He got that, and I think that's why. So whenever I see anyone trash talking Spielberg, he's just like, yeah, well, you can't tell me there's not a single movie he's done that wasn't good at some point. It's just like
right.
It's like saying you hate the Beatles.
Oh God, yeah. Telling me the Beatles are irrelevant, yeah, that's so not gonna fly.
Overrated, yeah.
Overrated. Bloody hell.
Yeah, Spielberg's definitely made his missteps, and he's done things that are questionable, and that might be something what you could consider some of his cons, where sometimes maybe he doesn't think twice before doing something. I'm thinking of like the re-release of E.T. when he decided to go in and digitally remove shotguns and things like that because he thought it was too scary. Yeah,
hanging out with George too much at that time.
It's very possible.
I'm
but yeah,
glad
so
it
I think that
stops.
was something he thought was a good idea, and he didn't think again. And that's maybe a con of his.
Yeah,
I'm happy to say that cut is. I just took my kids to see it at the drive-in about a month ago, and that it's the original cut.
Yeah, I think that one faded away. That went the way of New Coke, I think.
Low on diet. I'd like to see him kind of do a Western because I always got that.
Oh,
impression
yeah.
of the third Indiana Jones.
definitely.
When he's on the horse, that's as close as he gets to a Western.
That would be neat. It would just be fun to kind of see a resurgence in a Westerns period and get some of the modern filmmakers and do their take on it. Someone besides someone like Tarantino, which would just be a Western with a lot of F-bombs.
Mm-hmm.
And
So
for
true.
some reason, yeah, why does your gunfighter not wear boots?
I'm sure that's why he probably hired Mangold for the new Indiana Jones. Is like, yeah, the guy does Westerns, whether they're neo-Westerns or just straight up Westerns. The guy's been watching every kind of movie, whether it's Gary Cooper or John Ford or newer stuff.
I would like to see. I'm a scary movie junkie, and I just want him to drop one more horror film.
Oh yeah,
just one. I don't even care if it's bad. I just want his name on it.
Right, or at least produce it or something. And come up with the cast.
I know
They're
that
just
like a
spies.
whodunit film I like to see him do.
He could definitely do another Knives Out, Tin Little Indians kind of movie.
Oh yeah. I tell you, I really enjoyed revisiting Close Encounters of the Third Kind for this podcast because that's a movie I found really dull when I was young.
Mm-hmm.
But I got the Blu-ray from the library, and I think part of the problem was I was watching it on pan and scan VHS as a kid.
Ouch.
Yeah.
Watching that in widescreen was a whole new ball game.
Yeah, that'll color anyone's opinion.
I have definitely not seen any done special edition of it. I've only seen the Good Times home video edition. So I mean, and that was also rented from a library years ago. But yeah, it was one of those where it's like, I think my dad and we had seen it, and it was just like, yeah, I don't need to see it multiple times, but it was one of those, my sister wanted to see like an anniversary screening about a few years back, and I was just like, I got better things to spend my green on. It's just like, but it is interesting how that one is that was kind of his, I guess you could say, double feature in a way. Is like, if you're not sure if you like Jaws or, Duel on TV, you're definitely going to know whether you're a fan or not if you get to Close Encounters. And
Follow us on the web on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. The podcast is available on Podbean, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Anchor, Apple, and anywhere else podcasts are available. Feel free to review our show and leave comments on any of those sites. Thanks a million for listening.
It's a jacked up